Morning, Mandy.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. I just saw your email. How is everything?
He is highly medicated in bed, and I am taking a fat nap as soon as I'm done with this class.
Feel that? How about you, Candy? How are you doing this morning?
So I sound like a man. I think I picked up a bug
Oh,
from Adeline's doctor visit.
what is it, like a cold or?
I'm hoping my voice is gone. I'm coughing. I don't have a fever. Um, but I have work today, so I'm gonna have to suck it up.
Were you able to get those books while you were up there?
I did. I stopped in and grabbed them.
A big handful of them, wasn't it?
Yeah, I picked it up and I was like, oh goodness, this is like 100 pounds. And then Julian, I know you remember Julian, he was like, Mom, let me pack these in the house for you. And I was like, I don't think you're going to be able to. And he's like, let me try. And then he grabbed the bag and he said, oh, wow. This is awful, Mom. Your school is evil.
Yeah. The issue is instead of getting the two shorter versions of this book, you had the 5 book one instead. That was the issue. That's the only extra copy I had.
I appreciate it a lot.
But the good news is what I was telling the other two about getting on the website and looking up the extra readings. You don't have to do that because all of them are in those books.
Yes.
So Jacob sent me a message and said he might be here, he might not. He was having some internet issues while traveling. So we will go ahead and begin. Um, so Beowulf, usually you do not have a British lit course that does not start with Beowulf. Uh, Whenever I first started this journey and as a master's student, in my first year, I actually assisted another professor, and I was pretty much his grade. At big schools, unlike here, right? At big schools, these big fancy professors, all they do is come in and teach classes. And then they have graduate students do their grading for them. Right? Wouldn't that be nice? But I was his grader, and he did not start his British lit class out with Beowulf. I don't know if he was just trying to be a hipster or what. I don't know. But
A lot of colleges open up that window for people pursuing master's degree to teach underneath or to help underneath the professor. I wish Bluefield State would open that because I'd be all over it.
you don't, as much stuff as I have on my plate, I would kill to have somebody help me out. Like I would have enough to give them 40 hours a week. Okay.
Well, if I get to the end of this, you put a word in, you tell them that Mandy needs to be your sidekick.
Yeah, I will.
Then you got to get a master's program up in there too.
Yeah, we got in English at least. We got two pretty close. We got VT and Radford pretty close. Um, so there's that at least.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he did not start his off with Beowulf. Every time I've ever taught British Lit over the years, I always do. I usually don't include it in my World Lit, which both of you have. Well, Candy's taking it now. Mandy's already taken it. I usually don't include it in there, just because it's more of a British Lit thing, I think. Um, but some of the things that you may have learned about in that other class, or in Candy's case, we'll start learning next week. This is an epic poem. in the same vein as something like the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, Dante's Inferno, Paradise Lost. It's very much in that same sort of vein. The author of the poem is unclear. Like, there's no name attributed to whoever the author of this poem is. It's kind of like the Iliad and the Odyssey. We say a dude named Homer wrote them, but whether Homer was a real person or not, or whether that was just a name put on the storytelling tradition of who came up with the poem, that's a whole different thing. This thing almost did not survive until the present day. I don't know if you guys read the little introduction to Beowulf in our book. I'm sure probably most of you guys probably used that free PDF I sent just because you're waiting to get your books. But the poem almost didn't survive. There was one manuscript of it in the entire world at one point. Okay. And in 1731, this rich guy in England collected these old medieval manuscripts of these different literary texts. And the place where he was housing them burnt down. And the surviving manuscript, most of it made it, but there's a few lines, 100 lines of it, that were lost to time forever because they burnt. So kind of crazy to think about something like this, which is widely read today. I'd say probably hundreds of thousands of people read this every year in an English class. This is still pretty widely taught in high school too. And every year, probably hundreds of thousands of people read this poem. At one point, there was only one copy left. Okay, so it's kind of crazy to think about. The history of the book is a really interesting subject, and we're going to be doing a little bit of that all throughout the semester. I will be showing you guys some copies of original manuscripts of some of the stuff that we're going to read. We'll do a little calligraphy type work at a couple of different points. So, very interesting. This particular translation of it that you guys are reading, because as I mentioned the other day, Beowulf is written in Old English. Old English is more akin to something like a German than what modern English is. They were the Germanic peoples in the northern part of Europe. We are very similar to the Dutch, the Norse, the Viking peoples. That's kind of where the English language got its beginnings before the Norman conquest. This particular translation you guys are reading, it's really good. Okay, I've taught the poem before with several other translations of it. This is by far the best one. It's really readable, I think. Seamus Heaney, the famous Irish poet, I think he's still living. Let me Google. I want to see if he's still ticking. No, he passed away. He was older than I thought he was. He passed in 2013. But one of the most influential Irish poets of the past century translated this version of it. I think it's great. I love the way that he words and phrases things. I think he keeps the rhythm of the language. I love it. This type of poem, it wasn't meant to be written down. That's one reason why only one manuscript copy survived. It wasn't meant to be written down. This epic poem storytelling tradition was meant to be memorized and recited. Back in the day in 800 AD, they didn't have Netflix. So they had to do something to entertain themselves in the evening. Even stuff like having things to read wasn't very common. Before the printing press was an invention in the late Middle Ages. Before the printing press, in order to even have a book, you had to be able to go somewhere and you had to copy it down by hand yourself. Think about that. That's pretty crazy. But that was the only way that books were disseminated from the ancient period all the way up until the Middle Ages when the printing press became a thing. Especially in the Middle Ages, which is kind of where Beowulf begins, really the only books that were being disseminated much were in the church, like these monasteries that were spread all over Europe. The monks in the monasteries, they had to have something to do during the day. They went to mass a couple of times a day. They had stuff like vespers. The monastic life is an interesting subject in and of itself. But during their off hours, they would spend time copying these manuscripts, preserving these manuscripts. So that's even why we have a lot of this stuff in the ancient Greek period, stuff like Beowulf. That's why it has made it to us today. These monks in the Middle Ages copying it down. They didn't have paper in the same way that we have paper today. They, I should just kind of show you. I didn't prepare for it today, but I'll show you next time. They had these like scrolls, and the scrolls were made out of different materials. The handwriting and artwork on some of these old medieval manuscripts is beautiful. Like I don't know, the book here has a picture of the original manuscript on page 38. But these monks, think about how much your hand would cramp after copying for so long. Another kind of struggle with this type of thing, they often wrote in shorthand. So like they had like little symbols where they would leave like letters out just to try to make sure that their hand wouldn't cramp after too long. So today, if you're like a medieval scholar, trying to go back and decipher some of these manuscripts can be a challenge because you have to kind of know the code, the shorthand code, in order to even be able to do it. I will show you more of this kind of stuff when we do the Canterbury Tales, because most of you in the class have read The Wife of Bath's Tale already. So we will, especially on that day, I think I will show you some manuscripts just to kind of show you how they look and work. You can find a lot of them on the websites like the British Library and stuff like that. That's just a little bit of history of the book stuff. As far as this poem goes, sort of breaking it down, getting into the meaning of it and the discussion of it, one of the weird things about this poem, I don't see what you guys think. One of the weird things about the poem is it's kind of a hybrid poem of sorts. It feels like the original aim of the poem was to do something like the Iliad, right? Warrior culture, honor, glory, spoils of war, all this different stuff. Defeating the evil monster, Grendel. But there's also inserted in the poem, you can tell whoever the author was a pretty devoted Christian, because you also have all this tent Christian stuff in the poem as well. Like there's frequent mentions of divine providence, God delivering the people here from the evil that is Grendel by sending Beowulf. You have oftentimes there's one part where the author kind of laments the fact that all the people here aren't Christians. So when they pray for deliverance to Grendel, to get rid of Grendel, they're actually not praying to God. They're praying to like demonic forces. Okay. There's this kind of sense, if you've ever read the Old Testament, you know that the Israelites were always messing up, right? God delivered them out of Egypt. They wandered the desert for 40 years. They were always messing up in some way. They would always backslide. Right before Moses delivered the 10 Commandments, they started worshiping Baal. Right? Moses actually threw down and broke the 10 Commandments, and he had to go back up on the mountain and get them again. So there's very much this kind of discussion of how these people keep backsliding into pagan traditions. So there is a weird tension in the poem between pagans and Christians. That's one of the most notable things I think about today's readings. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to bring that up as kind of a beginning point. Did you notice that when you were going through it? Like, it seems like there's two different things happening at once and they don't necessarily glue together well. Did you guys kind of get that feeling? Or do you think it worked well? Maybe it's my reading where I don't think it glues well.
I think it's different. In the beginning, it's like talking about one subject, and as you get down to it, then it starts talking about demons and darkness. It's like it loses its point.
Right? It's kind of like two different stories happening at once in some respects.
Right, yeah.
Did you get that sense too, Mandy, as you were going through it? Maybe I lost Mandy temporarily.
It's a really, really long poem. I didn't like when you think of poems, you don't think of like long pages. You think of a short, sweet nothing. And I was like, oh wow.
Yeah, this epic tradition of storytelling, it's not, the poems don't necessarily rhyme like you would think of.
Mm-hmm.
See a poem. They're written in a way that is easy to kind of memorize them. What they do, let me see if I can show you an example here. It's easier to see how this works if you have the old English version of the poem. But what they do, what the poet here is doing is, rather than the lines rhyming, many words in the line start off with the same letter. So, like, you would have 4 or 5 words in the line, for instance, start with a consonant like F or S or T or whatever. And when you do that, it kind of makes it easy to roll off the tongue and be able to memorize it. So that's why it's so long, because you're telling a story like you would if you were writing a novel today. But you're telling it in a way
Who would try to memorize Beowulf?
Yeah, I mean, people memorized this. In the ancient period, they memorized the Iliad and the Odyssey. Think about how long those poems are.
I
Over
can't imagine trying to memorize any of those. That's wild.
Yeah, it makes the being able to do it a little easier with the sense that as you're kind of reciting it, memorization is very much rhythm based, and your brain, if it can kind of wrap around the fact that 3 or 4 words in a sentence start with the same letter, it makes it easier to remember. Over the summer, I probably had to memorize more lines than I ever have because I played the lead part in A Midsummer Night's Dream over the summer. I probably had 500 or 600 lines in the whole thing. Um, it is challenging for sure. That's nothing compared to memorizing all this, but it does make it easier to remember when you get into a rhythm. You, it almost becomes whenever you get it down to a certain point, you don't even think about it anymore. It just rolls off the tongue.
So I wonder, I wonder if they memorized it because they loved it so much, or if they memorized it because there was not that many copies, and in order to
Yeah,
perform or act it, they had to know it.
yeah. This type of storytelling tradition comes because most of the people weren't literate. Um, Probably only the priests that were hanging around, maybe like the most rich royalty and stuff, they were the only ones who could read. So if anybody was going to get a story like this, somebody had to tell it to them in a oral tradition. Um, yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, just the people couldn't read. This was how people were told stories and stuff. This goes back to before this type of storytelling tradition goes back even before the alphabet was a thing. Okay, that's how. I mean, Beowulf, the time period we're working with, the alphabet was a thing. And if you go back to like the Greeks and stuff like that, Homer, alphabet wasn't even a thing yet. So this is how people were told the stories. They would memorize them and they would pass them down to future generations. And even when you do that, think about how much things could go wrong in that process. Um, People probably changed the story a few times. That's probably part of what's happening here with the Christian stuff that we're talking about. Um, the original version of the poem probably didn't have much of that stuff in there, but as the years passed, people's values changed. The Christian faith started becoming prominent in England in the Middle Ages. Maybe that got worked in there by a new storyteller. Um, that's one of the interesting things about this stuff. The Native Americans did the same thing in America. Um, some of their like tales about how the world came to be, these creation stories, like the Iroquois creation story and stuff. Those works were also passed down through a oral tradition. They weren't written down, at least for a long time. I asked you a second ago, Mandy, what did you make of the blend between Christianity in the poem and like the pagan stuff, like honor and glory and spoils of war and all this? You think it was kind of weird, or you think it worked?
I don't know. I thought it was kind of weird. Like, um, I'd have to go back and look, but like the one part with the sword, I don't know. Like, I can see where you could look at it and say, okay, I can see that where it would link to Christianity, and then other ways not at all. I thought it was just weird.
Yeah, I mean, we think of Christianity, we think of stuff like the Beatitudes, right? Or Christ saying, give away all of your possessions and follow me. That's not what we see here, right? There's a whole 400 lines after Beowulf kills Grendel, where it's talking about all the treasure that he gets, all these sets of armors and the swords and the gold. There's definitely two different kinds of ways of thinking at work here. We don't think today, if you go and become a priest, you have to give up everything. Take a vow of poverty. So think about it's not Beowulf's kind of a Christian hero of sorts, but at the same time he's not, because they're all about winning treasure and gold and all these other spoils. There's a couple of passages that we can maybe look at. Let's see. If you guys have I don't know if you have Candy's got a book. Mandy, if you're looking at the PDF, I think it's around the line 170. Let's take a look at that. 170. Yeah, so instead of a page number, just count the lines. The lines are marked. So just about line 170 or so. So it's the poet's kind of introducing the plot that Grendel is coming into the mead hall at night, and he's eating these warriors and killing them and taking them back to his lair for snacks and all this stuff. So we see this tension between Christianity and paganism in this passage. The poet says these were hard times, heartbreaking for the prince of the Shieldings, powerful counselors, highest in the land, would lend advice, plotting how best the bold defenders might resist and beat off sudden attacks. Sometimes at pagan shrines they vowed offerings to idols, swore oaths that the killer of souls might come to their aid and save the people. That was their way, their heathenish hope. Deep in their hearts they remembered hell. The almighty judge of good and deeds and bad, the Lord God, head of the heavens and high king of the world, was unknown to them. Oh, cursed is he who in time of trouble has to thrust his soul in the fire's embrace, forfeiting help. He has nowhere to turn. But blessed is he who after death can approach the Lord and find friendship in the Father's embrace. So the poet here is pretty much saying, the people, they didn't have Christianity. They didn't know God, right? They were ignorant of the faith. So they were trying to, in their own way, pray to God, send somebody to deliver us. But praying to these pagan idols and stuff like that, they were really praying to demonic forces. The poet kind of laments the fact that this was happening. Several other examples of this kind of thing throughout the work thus far. Let's see. About line 690 or so, right before Beowulf and Grendel start fighting, we see it again. Then down the brave man lay with his bolster under his head and his whole company of sea rovers at rest beside him. None of them expected he would ever see his homeland again or get back to his native place and the people who reared him. They know too well the way it was before, how often the Danes had fallen prey to death in the mead hall. But the Lord was weaving a victory on his war loom for the weather geats. Through the strength of one, they all prevailed. They would crush their enemy and come through in triumph and gladness. The truth is clear. Almighty God rules over mankind and always has. So, those two passages I just read you, right, you can kind of see how the poet's just kind of sprinkling it in all throughout. It almost feels like a insertion into a story almost where it doesn't belong. That's almost what it feels like. That's partly because you probably had like a monk or a priest copying this down, and that's probably how these themes got introduced. You see the exact same thing happening if you study American Lit, if you study some of those Native American stories, Native American creation stories. They'll have little sprinkles like that in those too. It's really interesting. I probably beat this theme in the head. Let's move on to some other parts of this. This is very much a story, the traditional like hero's journey story. I could probably give you a whole lecture on the hero's journey. Like there's a famous book called The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell was a famous mythologist. He was writing in like the 1950s, 1960s. He wrote this giant book about how we all tell the same story over and over and over, the hero's journey. Beowulf definitely kind of fits the mold here. Grendel, well, throughout the poem, Beowulf faces three adversaries. Okay, three adversaries. We start today with Grendel. And following Grendel, next time he will encounter Grendel's mother. Grendel's mother vows revenge after Beowulf kills her son. And finally, at the end, Beowulf will encounter a dragon. He will fight a dragon. Okay. So the dragon, it's pretty much a symbol for like the devil. Okay. But all these different adversaries that he encounters offer him various challenges that kind of help with his growth along the way. Grendel, the first challenge, what makes Grendel interesting? The poet around line 110, when he's mentioning Grendel for the first time, about line 105, the poet's talking about the story of Cain and Abel. Like if you guys know your Genesis, right? Cain and Abel were the sons of Adam and Eve. Cain, of course, was the first murderer, right? He murdered Abel. He got jealous because Abel was giving better sacrifices to God. And he thought God liked Abel better, so he killed him. After that, God put what was called the mark of Cain on him. Like God marked him and cursed him and his lineage forever. And it was said that whether or not we take that quite literally or figuratively is kind of a different question. But the poet here is kind of taking that kind of thing literally. He says, for the killing of Abel, the eternal Lord has exacted a price. Cain got no good from committing that murder, because the Almighty made him anathema, and out of the curse of his exile there sprang ogres and elves and evil phantoms, and the giants too, who strove with God time and again until he gave them their reward. So the poet's pretty much saying here, Grendel is an ancient beast, right? He is human, but he's human in the sense that he comes from the lineage of Cain. He has that mark of Cain, which gives him these monstrous features. The mark of Cain, even when we think about America, the mark of Cain was used to explain things like race as well. Like the slave owning class in the South in America would say, okay, we have justification to own these slaves because their black skin is the mark of Cain, they said. Right? It shows that they're a cursed people by God. They deserve what they get in being slaves because they came from Cain's lineage. So that kind of thing has been used to justify things like slavery, too. But that's how the poet kind of marks Grendel here at the beginning as a monster. Let's see, there was another passage. Let's see. Yeah, a few lines down around line 135. It says, he was numb with grief but got no respite, for one night later merciless Grendel struck again with more gruesome murders. Malignant by nature, he never showed remorse. So the poet here is pretty much saying, whenever we think, this is a question I know we've talked about, I know Candy and I have talked about in my previous class with Frankenstein. Like, what is a monster? Is a monster made, or is a monster born? Frankenstein, pretty much the consensus in that is the monster was made, right? Because he was mistreated and stuff. Here, the poet's pretty much making it explicitly clear. This is a monster that is born. He inherits this sin of Cain. He's malignant by nature. He's naturally evil. There's almost no hope for, well, if he has the mark of Cain, there is no hope for redemption. He's damned. But he might as well, I guess, if he's cursed by nature, he might as well just be evil and eat people and all this stuff. Okay. What do you guys make of this creature? Even like this whole mark of Cain stuff. Just in general, what are your thoughts?
I think a lot of times writers write things in there just to spark empathy in their readers and stuff. Kind of like, I know this is completely off, but I don't know if either one of you have seen the new Spider-Man movie.
Yep.
But, it's got the Punisher in there. And so the Punisher is the bad guy, the villain, the whatever. But the storyline behind him, people become empathetic with Frank and how he lost his wife and all of those different things. So even though his character is just miserably played, you're empathetic with why he's that way. And so I think that would play back even into like older literature and things that we're reading of they depict them as this evil, but then they give you, bits and pieces as to maybe to make your heart, I don't know, not necessarily enable the evil, but be at least empathetic with it in some way.
Do you think that the poet here is doing that with Grendel? Like, oh, he's cursed. There's no hope for this guy. Are you kind of reading Grendel even yourself, Mandy, are you kind of reading Grendel empathetically? Like this guy has no chance.
I don't know that I necessarily am, but I can see why it would be written that way,
Hmm.
or how some could see it that way.
What about you, Candy? Do you think that? What do you think of Grendel, even in comparison to stuff you've read with me before, like Frankenstein?
I think it's instilling fear. It's kind of scary to read. It's, you see this person that's damned. There's no turning back. There's no do a good deed or ask for forgiveness. He's forever and always cursed. And it's like, it's instilling fear.
Right?
I see that too. I can see that too. Like just that could even tie into the Christianity, of where they're showing his character as there's no hope.
So I wonder if this is, I'm trying to think of how to word this. I wonder if he wrote this to promote Christianity in a way, or if he wrote this because in his time they were actual people who acted like Cain, and he was letting them know, you're cursed, you're damned, whatever you do, this is you.
Yeah. So you're kind of suggesting maybe Grendel is a symbol for um, wicked peoples in the society.
Right, yeah. Letting society know that the beacon of light is not always the beacon of light, that there's Cains among them, and instilling fear. And it obviously worked because we're reading it modern day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could kind of think about it in a way like it's an early example of asking that question, like where does evil come from? Um, is evil are some people just born bad? Grendel, the poet says, is um, what you just said about instilling fear with stuff like the mark of Cain. That's exactly what happened in America with the slave owners. Right? They said these people have the mark of Cain. Um, we have to keep them enslaved, otherwise they will rape and pillage and everything else. Um, they certainly instilled fear to justify the institution of slavery. There's actually, since we're on this subject, if you guys are ever curious, there's actually a modern novel called, actually it's called Grendel. The title of the novel is Grendel. Um, what was that author's name? John Gardner. John Gardner. Grendel. He does the like modern retelling of this. He explores all this stuff that we're discussing. Like, was Grendel born bad or was he made bad? Um, it's an interesting retelling if you're ever curious.
That can go into a lot of stances in life of, just going back to like last semester when we were talking about addictions and stuff. I don't remember which class that was in, but
Yeah,
anyway, just yeah, talking about the addictions and stuff and how people will sometimes would have the mind frame, well, I have to be an alcoholic because my father was, or I was born this way, or whatever. You know, it's a lot deeper than just born to be a bad guy versus, the reality of regardless of what you're born into, you still make the decisions of what you do with it.
right. Yeah, like addiction is, sometimes people do have predispositions to it with genetics and stuff. But nonetheless, that doesn't mean you have to listen to your gene. So maybe we can kind of even think about Grendel in the same way that you're suggesting, Mandy. Like, um, Grendel might have the mark of Cain, right? But maybe he could choose not to follow his genetic predisposition to evil. Like today, we think about like alcoholics, right? A lot of alcoholics have parents who suffered from that. So maybe you can choose not to follow in your parents' footsteps.
This is a fiction poem, but it makes me wonder what person was in the author's life to that inspired him to write this. Who was his Grendel? It's got me wondering. Because maybe it's fictional in a sense, but at the same time, something has happened that he was like, "Oh, I'm going to write about it."
It could just even just be a case of bringing the Christianity angle back into it, right? Like these are a, this is a people who are blessed by God, right? Whereas these other people over here um, aren't. It might even kind of be a case like that, where the poet's even saying, "Hey, look at these savages over here, right? They're just like Grendel." I'm just speculating here, Candy. I don't think I'm saying anything substantive here. I'm just guessing. But this is a good way now to even segue over into Beowulf himself. We're introduced to this guy. It's like 500 or 600 lines down before we finally get introduced to him. And I had a teacher once. Very first time I ever read this, I remember I had a teacher once who compared Beowulf to a WWE wrestler and giving a promo. Like if you ever watch pro wrestling, right? You'll all the entertainment in pro wrestling isn't even the matches so much as it is all the smack talk that goes on before the story leading up to the match. That's more of the entertainment than even the match itself. Sometimes we learn about Beowulf. He just kind of walks into the hall and is like, "I will beat this Grendel. Um, I come from a distant land. I came all the way here to beat him." And one guy's like, "Yeah, I heard you got an ego. I heard you decided just for the hell of it you would get into a swimming contest with another dude, and I heard that he beat your ass." That's pretty much what the guy says. Beowulf then is like, "Yeah, he might have beat me here, but I was swimming better than him. But then a sea monster grabbed me and pulled me to the bottom of the ocean. I killed that sea monster, and then other sea monsters grabbed me. So you wonder why the guy beat me here? That's because I killed like 10 sea monsters on the way here as I was swimming over." Um, he swam all the way across the English Channel, right? He swam all the way over fighting these sea creatures on the way. No wonder the guy beat me by a day or two. It's not because I'm a slow swimmer. It's because I'm a badass and I was fighting all these different sea creatures. While this guy just had a nice, easy swim. So he's just like talking. It's all. Think about it. It is almost like a WWE wrestler, right? Getting up and talking about how big and bad they are. Um, that's how we're introduced to Beowulf here. He's got an ego, right? He knows he's big and strong and bad, He's like, you know what? I am, but I'm going to back it up. I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you how big and bad I am. So we think of stuff like Christianity and getting rid of your ego, being meek. That's not what Beowulf is. Um, he's like, you know what? This actually helps him win. He's like, you know what? I'm so strong. This Grendel creature, it's kind of stupid. He doesn't know how to fight with swords and armor and shields. You know what? I'm even going to give Grendel a fair fight. I'm going to fight him hand to hand combat. Whoever wins, it's God's will. Whoever wins, and I'm going to fight him hand to hand combat. I'm not going to cheat or take an advantage. I know this thing's vicious, but I'm gonna fight him man to man, hand to hand. We'll see who comes out on top. Maybe that's arrogance here, right? Maybe it's arrogance to a fault. But we find out later that that's the only way Grendel could actually be killed, because his skin is impenetrable. A sword can't pierce his skin. So Beowulf actually, when they start fighting, it says in the poem, Beowulf doesn't even have any clothes on. He like gets completely butt naked to fight Grendel. He gets Grendel. He pretty much rips Grendel's arm off. He gets him in like a headlock, and then he like rips Grendel's arm off. And Grendel runs back off to die. He pretty much bleeds out. So, so it's really entertaining just reading about how sure of himself this guy is, almost to a fault. He wins the day this time, but will he in the future? I guess is with this kind of cocky demeanor. That's a question for next time. What you guys think? Do you think I'm characterizing him well here? Just kind of talking about how he's like a WWE wrestler, like talking about how big and bad he is.
It's funny how you link them like that, because that's how they all start. As soon as they come out, it's like you don't need a reporter to have a microphone. They have their own microphone tooting their own horn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it was a good comparison. In my mind, though, when I was reading that, I'm just like, this guy sounds like a little tiny, scrawny man that feels the need to act like he can lift 500 pounds in one sitting.
Yeah, just think about sometimes people are try to make up for deficiencies and like by going overboard with it. I mean,
Well, look at a lot of people who are bullies and stuff, or like you have one hothead on a ball team or whatever, and they're half the size of everybody else, but it's the mouth that they run all the time.
yeah, I had a guy whenever I was in high school. There was this dude. He was like 6 inches shorter than me. He always like tried to like pick fights with me and stuff for whatever reason. I'm like, dude, you're not even worth the trouble. Just buzz off. That's pretty much what I always did. And yeah, Beowulf Beowulf seems like that kind of. He's overcompensating for something. Would Beowulf drive a giant truck and have a stickers talking about how big his parts are? I don't know.
Uh, is Beowulf, is it pretty much like angel versus demon? Like Beowulf is on God's side and
Yep.
Grendel's on the devil, right?
Yep.
It's just funny to me how he's portraying this. because if at any point he read the Christian Bible, if it was around, of course, I don't think it was it? Wasn't that what you said?
It was like in the society, the old English society, it was, but people just didn't get to read it because they were illiterate. The only time they ever heard the Bible was when they went to Mass and heard it spoken out loud.
Well, assuming that their priests read it appropriately, it says in there, let the fruit that you bear speak for you. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. So the fact that he felt the need to try to convince somebody that he took down like 20 beasts and that already tells me that he had rotten fruit.
How do you mean, Candy? Just the fact that you think he's already kind of a flawed hero, or
Yeah, so in that instance, that verse to me, because everybody has their own interpretation, but that verse to me means when you say something, your fruit is so good that they automatically believe you no matter what. Like if, for example, if I say, "Hey, I just won the lottery of $1 million and I'm going to give you half of it," you would never think that I wouldn't, because my fruit is just that's the fruit I bear. It's truthful. My word is good. And the fact that he felt the need to tell this person, "Oh, well, I slayed 20 beasts and that's why it took me a long time." And it feels like he's got rotten fruit. He doesn't have the fruit to bear to back up his claim.
what line are you looking at with that fruit, Candy? Just so I can take a look,
Hold on. I have to look it up.
because that's really interesting.
Um John 15:5 is one.
Yeah, I
And
think
the
she's
one
pulling the scripture reference in reference to the fruits in the poem, not that the fruit
yes.
was mentioned in the poem.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Matthew 17:17 through 20 is the one that says he's talking about good tree bears good fruit, and people are known by their fruits. And if this is talking about, the Christianity, and like I said, this is going off that their priests, wasn't making their own things up in the books, then he should have already knew that. But he felt the need to convince someone otherwise.
Yeah, you're kind of saying that if he was a sure hero, right, he wouldn't have feel the need to boast in this way.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think you're certainly identifying some problems with this character very early on. He's cocky and confident to a fault, for sure. He's going to face tougher adversaries as we go than just Grendel. He's not only going to be tested physically like he was with Grendel in the coming parts, he's going to be tested spiritually as well. Okay. Will he be able to hold up to spiritual assaults as well as he does physical assaults? I guess we will have to find out. There is some foreshadowing here in our selection from the reading for today. When the poet, there's this whole like 200 or 300 line diversion when after they defeat Grendel, they're all celebrating and they start telling these stories about these other kings from times past that was as they're like drinking mead and stuff. But it actually from around the line about 1070 all the way up to about line 1170. So about 100 lines of the whole thing that we read for today. You get this story about these other kings, and you can kind of see the parallel between Beowulf and these other people. It pretty much talks about how their pride, one of them, their pride led to the fall. So I don't think that part is there for as an accident. It's meant to kind of foreshadow the struggles that Beowulf is going to encounter himself in the coming sections. You was wondering what the point of that was. Like, this seems random. That's kind of what it was. That's kind of what it was trying to do. Get you ready. One last thing I wanted to mention before we close out for the day is there's this whole theme in here. It's like a cycle of revenge. Like, revenge and retribution is certainly not something that we would think of as a Christian virtue. But in this society, they were kind of obsessed with it. If somebody did you wrong, you avenged it yourself with your own hand. It kind of talks about how the king is so ashamed that he can't kill Grendel himself because he's an old man. It brings dishonor on his name. So Beowulf helps him restore his honor. That's why he's so gracious in giving Beowulf all these gifts. He even names Beowulf his own son, because the dishonor that he suffered in not being able to avenge the wrong that was done to him was too much to live with. Likewise, you can probably guess where the story is going from here. Beowulf killed Grendel. He, even if he was justified in doing so, he still nonetheless did wrong to another person, Grendel's mother. So in this society, Grendel's mother is justified in going after Beowulf in retribution. This is a society that thought you were justified. An eye for an eye, right? If somebody does you wrong, you go kill them too. So that I just wanted to make a quick mention of that as we kind of close out for the day too. But that is part of the motivation of the next villain we will encounter. So good. This I always like teaching this thing. I think it's fun. So you guys, for next time, we'll finish it up. So I gave you the longer chunk to read in between the Thursday to Tuesday gap, just so you have more time.
All right. Y'all have a good day. We've got our first quiz on this week, or is it listed this week?
Yeah, next weekend, I will give you guys your first reading response, reading journal thing. Yeah, but I wanted to finish this first before I gave that to you. So,
all right. Thank you.
I'll talk more about it next week.
All right. Y'all have a good weekend.
See you, Mandy. See you.
Bye.
See you, Candy.